All right, let's jump right in. Uh, we're looking at some really intriguing historical mysteries this time, all surrounding the Kennedy assassination. You know, the stuff you sent over from the third decade. That journal, it's like a gold mine for JFK assassination research.
Oh, absolutely. And this particular set of articles, what makes them so fascinating is the time period. They cover 1973 to 1983.
A whole decade.
Yeah, a decade where all these new pieces of evidence, alternative series, they were really starting to take hold.
It's like the investigation was blown wide open, right? And the articles you picked out, they zero in on these dead suspects, people who died under, let's just say, suspicious circumstances. And then there's this whole other thing about Lee Harvey Oswald's military records. It's like stuff that just doesn't add up.
There's a lot there. Potential confessions, mysterious deaths, records that are just, well, they're strange.
Yeah, a lot to untangle. Each one of these could lead us down a really fascinating and maybe even a little unsettling path.
For sure.
So let's start with this guy, Joseph Miltier. Now, he was deep in some pretty far-right political groups like the White Citizens Council and the National States Rights Party.
The NSRP.
Yeah, the NSRP.
Yeah.
And they weren't messing around. I mean, history of violence, church bombings, even suspected of being involved in the murder of Medgar Evers, the civil rights activist.
Wow. So we're talking about some pretty extreme beliefs here. And it gets even creepier. There's this recorded conversation from November 9th, 1963, just weeks before the assassination.
Right.
Miltier is talking to a friend of his, Willie Somerset, who is also an informant, and he basically predicts Kennedy's assassination. He says it's going to be from an office building with a high-powered rifle.
And it's chilling how close that prediction is to what happened in Dallas. The method, the location, it all lines up. You can't help but wonder if he knew something.
Right. And then after the assassination, he's almost bragging about it, saying that a patriotic group, that's his words, outsmarted the communists. It's just unsettling. It is. But here's the thing. Despite that conversation, there's no hard evidence that links Miltier to Oswald or Jack Ruby.
So was he just, like, a conspiracy theorist who got lucky with a really good guess?
Sure.
Or was there something more to it?
Yeah, it's like a piece of a puzzle that doesn't quite fit, but you can't ignore it.
Exactly. More questions than answers. What were his connections? Why was he so confident? We may never know, but it adds another layer of mystery to the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, talk about another piece of this puzzle, the Mexico City tapes. These are recordings of someone claiming to be Oswald, contacting the Soviet embassy in Mexico City.
Right, and this is where things get really interesting. There's this unredacted FBI report that says the agents who listened to the tapes, agents who actually knew Oswald, some even interacted with him in Dallas, they said it wasn't him.
Wait, so there was an imposter Oswald running around?
Well, that's one interpretation. It definitely raises some questions. But then you have the House Select Committee on Assassinations. The HSCA, they concluded there was no recording of Oswald's voice at all. And they relied a lot on testimony from FBI agents who, by the way, were potentially involved in destroying evidence.
Hold on. So we've got the FBI saying it's not Oswald and the HSCA saying there's no recording. What's going on here?
Yeah, it's a bit of a hall of mirrors, isn't it? And then there's this whole other thing. David Bellin, a former Warren Commission attorney, he just casually mentions on the Nightline TV show that the commission actually had access to those Mexico City tapes.
What? Why didn't they say anything about that during the investigation? That seems like pretty important information.
It does, doesn't it? And to make it even weirder, Mark Lane, he was a big critic of the Warren Commission. He was also on that episode, and he didn't even press Bellin on it.
It's like everyone was just okay with letting that slip by.
It is strange.
So we have a tape, maybe with an imposter's voice on it, that the Warren Commission had but never really addressed. What could be on that tape? And why all the secrecy?
That's a question researchers have been asking for years. What if those tapes held the key to Oswald's motives, his connections? What if they could rewrite the whole story?
It's almost too much. But let's try and untangle another thread. This time, we're looking at Oswald's military service. There's some pretty strange discrepancies in his training records.
Right, and those discrepancies, they come from another Marine, Daniel Patrick Powers, who trained with Oswald at Keesler Air Force Base. And what's interesting is that Powers' account of their training, it doesn't line up with Oswald's official records.
So what are we talking about here? What kind of inconsistencies?
Well, their course numbers don't match, the squadron assignments are different, even Oswald's occupational specialty code is off. It's like someone deliberately messed with his records.
Like to create a false trail, a made-up history for him.
Yeah, exactly.
But why?
That's the big question. And it gets even weirder. There's this career field assignment code 27 on Oswald's student record, which is apparently a code that isn't even used anymore.
It's like a secret code from a spy movie. What kind of training was he in that needed to be hidden?
Well, researchers have tried to get answers from the Marine Corps, the Air Force, but they've hit a wall. No one seems willing or able to explain what Oswald was really doing during his time in the Marines or what that Code 27 even means.
Okay, now I'm getting chills. This is like a conspiracy thriller.
It is, and we're just getting started.
So we've got dead suspects, missing tapes, and a whole lot of questions about Oswald's time in the Marines. So where does this Martin Schran guy, where does he fit into all of this?
Schran, well, his story, it adds another layer of weirdness to all of this. Remember, he was another Marine trained with Oswald and Powers at Keesler. And later, while he was stationed in the Philippines, he died under, let's say, questionable circumstances.
Yeah, the official story is that he accidentally shot himself while he was on guard duty. But the details are so strange, it's hard to buy that it was just a simple accident.
It is. The official report says that Schran, he somehow loaded a bullet into the chamber of his rifle, which, by the way, was against regulations. Then, supposedly, he dropped the rifle, which caused it to go off under his armpit.
You're kidding, right? I mean, come on, it sounds like a bad movie.
The whole thing is just, it's full of things that just don't add up. And remember, Schran, Oswald, and Powers, they were pretty close during their training, and even after they were stationed together. Some people think that Oswald might have even been involved in Schran's death.
Wow, okay, now we're getting into some serious conspiracy theories. What's the thinking behind Oswald being involved?
There's a theory that Oswald and his buddies, let's call them, that they were recruited for some kind of secret intelligence operation, given fake training records to keep it all under wraps. And then Schran, he was eliminated when he tried to back out or defect from the mission.
Man, that is dark. Especially when you think about, the parallels between Schran supposedly defecting and what Oswald did later. Was Oswald being, I don't know, manipulated? Was he just a pawn in some bigger, much darker game?
These are the questions that keep researchers up at night. And the fact that we're still asking them all these decades later, it shows just how deep this mystery goes. It's a story about power and secrets and the lengths that people will go to protect those secrets.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls. Every time you think you've got to the bottom of it, there's another layer, another secret hiding underneath.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And that's what makes these stories so interesting.
Right. They make you question everything you think you know, to look past the official story and consider that maybe, just maybe, the truth is a lot more complicated and a lot more disturbing than we ever thought.
I think you're right.
So if we go with that there is more to the story, what could the motive be? Why go through all this trouble to cover things up? Well, that's the question, isn't it? The question that's fueled all those conspiracy theories. Some people believe that Kennedy was targeted by, anti-Castro Cubans. They were furious about how he handled the Bay of Pigs invasion. Others think it was the mafia. They were, enraged by Bobby Kennedy's crackdown on organized crime.
And then there are those who think it was, elements within the government itself.
Right.
Maybe they didn't like Kennedy's policies on Vietnam or civil rights. There are just so many possible players and so many possible motives, it's almost overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a real tangled web. But I think the key is to, stick to the evidence, look closely at the things that don't add up, and just be open to the possibility that the official story, well, maybe it's not the whole story.
Okay, let's go back to those inconsistencies in Oswald's military records. Someone really went to a lot of trouble to create a fake history for this guy. What was the point of all that?
Well, was it to set him up? To make him the fall guy, the lone gunman? Or was it to, discredit him ahead of time so that if he ever tried to tell his side of the story, no one would believe him? Maybe it was to hide his involvement in some, top secret operation? It's hard to say for sure, but the fact that these discrepancies are there, it just makes you think that someone was trying to manipulate the story around Oswald.
Right. And then there's that code, that 27 code. It's like a breadcrumb leading to something we're not supposed to see.
And the fact that the Marine Corps and the Air Force won't cooperate, it just adds to that suspicion that something is being hidden. What was so sensitive about his training that it had to be, wiped from the records? Was he involved in something that, if it came out, would have had huge consequences?
These are questions that need answers, and yet here we are with more questions than answers. It's frustrating, but I guess that's also what makes these mysteries so, so captivating. They keep us searching, keep us looking for the truth, even if it's hard to find.
That's exactly what we're doing, right? Piecing together these little bits of evidence, looking at what doesn't add up, and following the threads of these stories wherever they lead.
Yeah, like we're detectives working a cold case, trying to set the record straight.
Yeah, I like that. And sometimes just asking the right questions, that's the first step.
Speaking of questions, those Mexico City tapes, they just keep coming back to mind. What happened to them? Why are they, like, vanished?
Yeah, that's another piece of the puzzle that's just, it's shrouded in mystery. Some researchers think that they were destroyed by the CIA to cover up their own involvement in the assassination. Others think they might still be out there, hidden away in some secret archives somewhere.
Yeah, it's like we're chasing ghosts, trying to catch these little pieces of history before they disappear. But sometimes those little pieces, they can lead to something big.
And speaking of big discoveries, have you seen those FBI files that were just declassified? They actually shed some new light on the Schrain case.
Oh, yeah. I read about that. What did they find? Anything that, I don't know, goes against the official story?
Well, the details in those files, they kind of suggest the initial investigation, it was pretty sloppy. Like some key evidence might have been missed. Or maybe even, hidden on purpose.
Okay, tell me more. What kind of evidence are we talking about here?
For example, there were conflicting accounts from witnesses about, the position of Schrain's body, where the rifle was. Some witnesses said the rifle was found like a good distance away from his body, which wouldn't make sense if it was just an accidental shot.
Interesting. So are we saying that Schrain might have been murdered?
It's definitely a possibility. It needs more investigation, for sure. And to make it even more suspicious, the files also mentioned these rumors that were going around among the Marines at the time. The rumors suggested Schrain was involved in some kind of, espionage.
Espionage. Okay, now we're talking. What kind of espionage are we even thinking about here?
The files, they don't really get into specifics, unfortunately. But those rumors, even if they're just rumors, they add another layer to Schrain's death. They hint at a whole world of secrets, covert operations, a world that Oswald might have been pulled into as well.
Man, that's wild. It really makes those discrepancies in Oswald's records even more suspicious. What if those records were, changed to hide his involvement in some secret mission, a mission that Schrain was also a part of?
That's a theory that's getting more attention these days. But right now, it's still just that, a theory. We need more evidence, more connections between Oswald and Schrain to really make that link.
But even without those concrete links, the similarities between their stories, it's pretty hard to ignore, right? Both Marines may be connected to intelligence stuff. Both died under mysterious circumstances, and both of their deaths, they just raise a ton of questions about the official stories.
It's true. Those parallels, all those unanswered questions, they keep coming up throughout this whole deep dive. It makes you think, makes you look beyond the surface. Consider those hidden agendas, those concealed truths, and how information might have been manipulated.
So where do we even go from here? How do we untangle all of this? It feels like we're barely scratching the surface.
Well, the most important thing is to keep looking. Never give up on the truth, even when it seems impossible to find. We have to keep examining the evidence, question what we think we know, and demand transparency from those in power.
It's a battle, isn't it? The fight for truth and accountability. But it's a fight worth fighting, especially when we're talking about events that have shaped our history and continue to shape our world today.
And who knows? Maybe someday those missing pieces will turn up, those secret documents will be released, and we'll finally have a better understanding of what really happened.
Well, we've gone through a lot today, explored some really mind-boggling mysteries. From a potential confession to those inconsistencies in Oswald's military records and the unsettling death of Martin Schrain. These stories, they really make you question the official narratives. They make you look at things from a different angle.
They remind us that history, it's rarely as simple as it seems. The truth is often buried under layers of secrets, confusion, and sometimes even straight up lies.
We've come across so many unanswered questions today. Questions about why, about how, about the role of powerful people and institutions.
And those questions, they keep us digging, keep us searching, keep us pushing for those answers.
So what does all this mean for you listening right now? What can you take away from all this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to always be a little skeptical, question everything, and never stop looking for the truth.
Don't forget, these mysteries, they're not just about the past. They have meaning for us today, for our future. They remind us to pay attention, hold those in power accountable, and never just take things at face value. Was Oswald really a lone gunman? A patsy caught up in something much bigger? Or was it something else entirely? The things we've looked at today, they suggest there's a lot more to this story.
Keep exploring these mysteries, dig deeper, ask your own questions, and come to your own conclusions.
Because in the end, the search for truth, it's something we're all a part of.